I can hear you.
Trump is now president of the United States.
Why are men and boys struggling? And what should we do about it?
In a world of chaos and our attention is being pulled in different directions, the Pursuing Truth podcast is seeking the solution by having authentic conversations that are aimed to impact culture.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pursuing Truth podcast. I'm your host, Levi Brickley, and I've taken a month and a half break from podcasting, which maybe is the longest amount of time that I've gone without producing an episode. So I just want to give you guys a reason as to why I haven't been present, maybe like I should be, but I also think that there's a time to take a break, even though that wasn't effectively communicated. But throughout the last month, I've really been battling through some issues with my family and how that has been a result on me and my emotions, mentally, spiritually, the things I'm working through. Also, last week and a half was my birthday. And normally when I record episodes is not when I get off of work like I am currently, but it is on my weekends, on my Sundays and Mondays is when I record episodes. So that caused a little bit of a gap in the episodes as well. And honestly, I just haven't had anybody that wants to or is willing to come over here to the house, sit in the studio, have a conversation. But those are a few things. If this is your first time listening to the Pursuing Truth podcast, I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for clicking play on today's episode. I hope that this episode inspires you, motivates you, brings you to think of things a little bit deeper and look for the meanings and the purpose behind the things that happen in your life. Podcasting for me, after 2 years, 97 episodes, has been a total journey. And the thing that I love about the journey of podcasting is I can go back 2 years ago and I can listen to a particular conversation that I had back then and it be like, wow, like I totally think differently than I did back then. And I hope that listeners that come in, when you go back and you listen to new episodes, old episodes, that this is a very open and free-flowing type platform for me. I have one common goal, and that is to inspire conversations authentically. And I think to some degree, with a lot of people, that has been a success in meeting that goal that I have here on the Pursuing Truth podcast. And I just know that from the conversations I've had with listeners that have reached out to me and told me how it's impacting them and how it's moving in their life, or, you know, maybe a way that they related to a particular conversation or something that was said. And I think that is the most awesome thing about it. On the other hand is people that listen to an episode, say 9 months ago, created this definition of who Levi is based on that conversation. And just like any other conversation that we have in our day-to-day lives, those conversations can be totally different than the conversation that we would have had 8-9 months later. Therefore, I just really think that recording a podcast is extremely beneficial in its own regards for that, because maybe somebody is in the same position that I was, say 8-9 months ago, a year and a half ago when I was having that conversation. But maybe somebody has the willingness to watch me evolve and other guests I've had on the podcast throughout the last couple years, see how they evolve. And it's just an awesome journey is really what it is. And I just pray and I hope that as you listen, that it doesn't become something that necessarily defines Levi, but that it's something like, Levi maybe could grow on that. Maybe I should have a conversation with him. Instead, what happens a lot of times is we make assumptions, we make judgments, and those things are things that I've had to battle through. But knowing that it's been a while since I recorded an episode, like I said, if this is your first time, I just want to tell you a few things about myself. I am Levi Brickley. I live here in southeastern Kansas. I was a law enforcement officer for 5 years. Then I recently just got into the private sector 9 months ago, and now I work in protective services for a local convenience store. I work with some of the lower income drug addicts. What I've found is a lot of fatherlessness and those things. But I think that you find, even if you don't always enjoy what you're doing, you can find some like meaning and some purpose behind it, like something that kind of drives you. And one thing that I love about what I currently do is having the opportunity to sit down with young men and encourage them. Because even here on the podcast, that is my goal, is to encourage, not to discourage, not to demean, but to provoke meaning. I want to provoke meaning. I want to discover purpose. I want to inspire that conversation internally. So that's one of those things that I love about my job, is the moment that I get to sit down with a young gentleman, 17, 19 years old, that's maybe going through some of the things that I experienced when I was 17 years old. And I love that about my work life. Where I come from is a family of 8, and I actually have a twin sister as well. And so you get all those different personalities of each one of them individually, and the things that I get to pull from, learn from, their experiences, my experiences, our conversations, all of it. It's just a giant learning process that I thoroughly appreciate, because what it's taught me is to have so much grace and mercy, because I know my family member's background. Therefore, if I know their background, I should know to be more empathetic. I should know to be more compassionate. And being the youngest of all of them provided me so much opportunity to watch them fail, then watch them succeed. And now I get to implement that into my own life. And that's where a lot of these conversations on the podcast come from. I don't have a formal college degree. I don't have anything formal that makes me a, qualified to be a podcast host. I'm not a psychologist. I surely don't profess to be a life coach. I profess relationships and how important and intrinsic they are to our long-term success, is to develop and grow in these relationships. And I think that that's something that needs to be communicated more effectively. And the reason why I do what I do right now, a lot of what it stems from is my fatherlessness, my lack of older male mentorship. Now, I got some older brothers that I can pull information from and that I look up to and things like that. But I never had a father figure that was down in the grit with me besides my grandfather, but he passed away when I was 16 years old. But into my early adulthood, being a man is something that I've had to learn and evolve from so many mistakes. And how do I deal with those things? And that's what I get to talk today about on the podcast. I know that this is a really long introduction, but I really want you just to kind of know where my foundation is, what brings us to light, what are a few things that have brought me here. I've come from many failed relationships. I've failed as a man. I've been complacent. I've been a victim. I've been lacking of responsibility in my life. I've been lacking my effectiveness. I've lacked in every context. And I just want to share that with you and just be raw with you that I am no better than anybody that clicks play. I am a failure. And it sounds terrible, but I think that all of us are failures. I think all of us aren't exactly who we want to be. Therefore, if we aren't who we want to be, then we have this expectation of perfection, but it seems like it's something that we can never attain. And I really come at it from that context because of these 15 things that I'm going to get into today. So the first thing I want to talk about is the beauty in the present moment. Oftentimes we look back at our past, and our past becomes something that we choose to become bitter about. We can become resentful about. We can look at the people who played the parts in our past, and we can look at them and say that it's all their fault as to why I'm struggling with the things that I'm doing right now and the way I'm thinking right now, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And although there may be some validity in those thoughts and those ideas about the hurts and the experiences that we've been through, that doesn't necessarily define us. That doesn't necessarily define us. But what does define us is how we react to those things. Are you merciful? Are you graceful? Do you have empathy? Do you have compassion? Are you forgiving? Are you loving? How much pursuit do you put into what is good rather than what maybe inspires the negative emotions, the negative thoughts? How much energy do you put into what is good? And I think in this is why, obviously from a Christian foundation, I define myself based off of what would Jesus do? I know there's WWJD, that old context of like, what would Jesus do? It's such a cliche thing to say, but in it is, I can't rely on myself. I need to rely on something more than me, because if I'm so present with me, then I can't be present with others, because then I become so selfish and so included into my own emotions and thoughts that I can't be present with the people that God calls me to be present with. And there's beauty in the present. It's a way to look at the past and say who I want to be in the future, and knowing that the decisions that you make right now can directly affect 6 months, 6 years, 60 years from now. You are full of potential, and the present moment, if you aren't capturing it in the sense of, let me make the right decision here to positively influence the future. Look, you don't have control of the chaos that is in front of you. It's going to come, it's going to show up, and it's going to rear its ugly head at a time when you least expect it. But how do you prepare for it right now? Maybe that's reading a book that is something that is inspirational, something that's motivational for you. And then you can reflect back on, when I had a similar experience in the past as something like this, you can find the sense of meaning as you experience the challenge that's in front of you, the chaotic times that are in front of you. When you face those, you can be like, well, I can relate it to what was in the past. And I can be like, oh, okay, I'm present right now with the emotions. I'm present with the underlying spirit behind it. I'm present with the meaning behind it. And so you can find some peace and some security in that. And then you can make a decision. And life is full of our decisions. And what shapes us and defines who we are is that decision that you're going to make as a result of what you're currently experiencing. The second thing that I want to talk about goes in line with this is the past does not define you. And when I was thinking about this, was exactly what I was just talking about with the podcast, is you could go back and listen to episode 81, which is an episode on male vulnerability for instance. And I talk about how we have to be very careful on who we are vulnerable with. And I think it's because vulnerability, at least at the time, maybe still is, was a flashy word to talk about. And I don't think that it's so much about being vulnerable. It's about being authentic. I'll give you an example of this. As I'm struggling with these things with my family, one of the conversations I recently had with my mom, which probably got me to kind of open back up and feel a little bit better, was when I just told her that I'm hurt by the situation. It's so hard to admit when we're hurt, because my pain of it some days was, man, I was angry. Some days I was bitter. Some days I was like, oh, she's going to learn. He's going to learn. And instead of just being like, you know what, I just don't feel good. I just am hurt. I'm sad. I'm down about it. And it doesn't define me. Okay? The past doesn't define me. But when I openly admitted that I was hurt, was me being authentic, which allowed for more understanding from my mom. And I think so often it is so hard for us to just get real and authentic about our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our ideas, that we really become absent. And we start having to peel back the layers of the problem instead of really just honing in on the solution. And the solution begins when we admit, when we're honest with ourselves and we're honest with others. Mom, I'm hurt and I'm not ready for that conversation. And it's that simple. And so I think that there was some resolve in the context of just understanding Levi's hurt right now. It's not the time. It's not the time. But I'm present with that emotion. Although it does not define me, there's beauty in that presence, and the past doesn't define me, but I'm preparing for where I'm going to go with the challenges that were presented in some of the things I've talked about in previous episodes about my trip to Arizona. Now, here's another one for you guys. Number 3 is facing darkness. When you face darkness, do you become discouraged? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel depressed? Or do you stand firm? As Ephesians chapter 6, is it chapter 6 or chapter 10? Talking about putting on the full armor of God. And I think about this first. Shod your feet with the preparation. Okay? And I think about that in my context, working in private security, is that I get into a lot of fights physically. And these stem from initially the mental fight, like, let me make direct eye contact with you. All these nonverbal cues of displaying confidence, and maybe that confidence is the peace through strength, as Ronald Reagan would say, is the peace through strength, is that I'm going to portray myself as completely competent and confident in order to maintain peace, because in my competence and confidence is strength. And I think about this when I have been in a fight, is immediately I step back and I put my dominant hand, which I'm right-handed, I put my dominant hand foot back behind me, and I spread my feet with the preparation that I am about to be physically assaulted. So then I can react. It also gives me more stability where I'm stronger. I'm prepared for a push. I'm prepared for a punch. I'm not just going to fall over, but I'm prepared. My feet are prepared. I'm shotting with preparation for what is to come, whatever that attack is. But not only that, I'm standing firm. I'm standing firm that this barrier is not going to be crossed. So when we face darkness, we have to have something that is the stronghold, the foundation that holds us to what we know is right and what is wrong, what is true, and what is false. We have to know, so that way we aren't just in this dance when we're facing the darkness, but when we're facing the darkness, we know exactly where we're at, and we can stand there strong, competently, and confidently, and being prepared for the attacks that are coming. Now, there's times for a dance. There's times to make a move where you're shifting away from the darkness that's coming. But we cannot outrun the darkness that is in front of us. Death is in front of us, ladies and gentlemen. Every single one of you are going to die just like me. That is a structure of reality. That is the fundamental truth. Some of us will live longer and others of us will die sooner. We don't know when that time is. But what are you doing right now? Maybe you'll be 85 years old and maybe you'll be the one in the nursing home where you have your wits and your mind all right there. While others of us may struggle with our physique, we may be in a wheelchair for the last 15 years of our life, but our mind is completely clear. Some of us may deal with dementia and Alzheimer's, and we forget everything that happened. But if you go into your life and you look at it like, I know that time is coming. That darkness is going to present itself. If I can look at that and I can say, right now, I can make an effective change where I'm not sitting in that wheelchair at 70, 80 years old, and I'm not thinking about everything that I could have done better. But if I'm thinking about my life like, I don't want to be resentful. I don't want to live with regrets. I want to be present. I want to find the beauty in all of it. That I think it's a lot easier to deal with. I think that's where the true happiness is found, is that we are present and we are making moves that are positively going to affect our future. Number 4, place yourself with those who want what's best for you. A lot of times we place ourselves with people who are just fun. And there's a time and a place for that. But they're just fun. That is all that they provide us. When deep inside, we need encouragement, we need love, we need people who look at us and see all of the great qualities in us that we don't see in ourselves, that they remind us what we are great in. And we need those people who believe in us enough to at least show up and be honest and real with us that, hey, Molly, this is what I see in you. Levi, this is what I see in you. And I want so much more for you than what you're currently experiencing. One of the things that my buddy Ryan has really latched on to is he catches me. I have conversations with people who think that I just hang out with people who boost my ego and make me feel all good and giggly inside, and it's all about me and my confidence and this and that. It's all about Levi and narcissistic behavior. That's all bull crap. What I ask of Ryan is that Ryan is real with me. When he sees me failing, he comes to me and he says, Levi, you're failing here, and I expect more of you. I want to see more of you. But what's awesome about that honesty is that Ryan's learning a key element to his masculinity is being an effective communicator about the things that he sees, but he's not reacting with ill intent out of emotions. He's like, I want what's best for you. And one of the things that he always says to me, and this is something that I've always said to him, is we have to be very careful on what we say because other people can perceive it differently than what our intentions were. And so I'll be like, Ryan, I said X, Y, and Z. This is what's going on. And he'll be like, well, do you think, Levi, that you could have worded that a little bit better? Maybe what Ryan's doing is challenging me to think of things differently so my perception changes so that I can be more effective than I was in that moment, so that I can move forward and be stronger rather than sit back here and just loathe in all of the things that are chaotic in my world. We need people like that. We need people who want and see the best in us, but are also alongside us, encouraging us, holding us accountable, being there in the dark times and being there in the bright times, being there when everything seems to be falling apart and needing somebody who is like, hey, I know a lot of things have fell apart in your life, but I'm right here, dude, and I'm going to build the house with you. I'm going to build this life with you. Brick by brick, I will be in the muck with you because I believe in the potential of who you are going to be. Not who you are right now. They see all those things, and those are things that they love about us, but they believe in more for us, and they encourage us to continue to move forward on that path. Fifth thing, a convicting spirit. Now, what do I mean by this? Oftentimes when we see that somebody is doing something that we don't like, we go to them and we're like, hey, you piece of crap. You shouldn't be saying that. You shouldn't be doing it this way. You should be doing it the way that I think that you're doing. You should be doing it the way I think you should be doing it. You should be following as I say. And so they convict. They say you're doing X, Y, and Z wrong. And maybe in some context, in fact, maybe my last episode was that for you, was that it felt like Levi was convicting of the hookup culture. And not in the slightest. I know my intentions were that, hey, let's talk about hookup culture. Let's talk about the detriment emotionally and why we sometimes fall into hookup culture, or that I have in the past fell into hookup culture, was because I was seeking validation in women. I was seeking validation with other men around me because I thought at the time it was cool to sleep with that girl on Friday night. It wasn't to convict. It was to inspire the conversation. But I know where my spirit was then. Is that I didn't want to convict anybody. I just wanted to inspire the thought process. Maybe these are things we don't think about when we talk about hookup culture. A lot of people will say, oh, it's just wrong. Well, to somebody else, it doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel wrong. So maybe what we need to do is shape the thinking. Maybe we need to inspire the thoughts to find the meaning. Maybe while I'm hooking up with people, I'm seeking that validation that I can attain that woman. There's some truth there. But had I have gone to everyone on a podcast and I was like, you are a devalued human being. You add no value to anybody's life when you're hooking up, that's a convicting spirit. If I said, you're going to hell, you're a failure, you're this, you're that, that's convicting. So what's the opposite of having a convicting spirit? What's the opposite of that? An encouraging spirit. And the result can be the same. Look, it's the Spirit's job to convict. It's not your job as a brother, as a sister, as a coworker. It's not your job to convict. It's your job to be like, hey, I see this area and obviously you're struggling with it. I'm here for you. And I'll tell you what, I'll help you out a little bit. This is the way that I'm going to help you out. I'm going to provoke maybe that conversation with the family members as there's that problem. I'm going to try and effectively communicate the problems that you're having and the problems that they're having. I'm going to try and effectively communicate that with you. I'm not going to get wrapped up into the gossip and the slander of what's occurring. What I'm going to do is just try to understand both angles and try and bring both of those together. My spirit is of encouragement to provoke a better relationship, not to convict one individual over the other and saying that this one's doing this more wrong than the other one, but that I'm trying to develop that relationship in a healthy manner rather than discouraging or diminishing one over the other. I want to encourage the best for that relationship. I failed here too. I have failed here so many times. I remember, for instance, going back to my friendship with Ryan, and this is just a personal opinion, and it could be a whole episode in and of itself. But when I started podcasting, I gave up playing video games completely. In fact, I remember there was one night I was intoxicated and I called my brother-in-law Bill over and I said, hey, Bill, come pick up this stupid PlayStation 4. I'm going to sell it to you for $100. He was here in like 15 minutes on my doorstep, picked it up, and I haven't played a video game since. Now, Ryan enjoys playing video games. Ryan enjoys playing video games because it's a way for him to kind of escape the world for a moment and enjoy conversations with his friends while he's playing Madden or Call of Duty or whatever game he's playing. But at the time, I would go to Ryan and be like, dude, what a failure, dude. Why are you playing video games? Da-da-da-da. That was convicting. And Ryan did not take to that well at that time. And obviously, I wouldn't be talking about this if I knew Ryan would be uncomfortable with me talking about this. But at the time, that was convicting to him, and rightfully so. Ryan reacts, and he's like, screw you, da-da-da, I disagree with you, blah, 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 blah. Ryan and I, boom, we didn't talk for like 6 months after that. Ryan and I, now we look back to that time, and we're like, yo, both of us needed that. I experienced some of the best growth here on the podcast at that time due to that conversation that I had with Ryan, because it kind of like provoked me, and Ryan was comfort prior. He was comfort where I had to get uncomfortable with being without Ryan, who gave me some sense of comfort in the moment. And I was thinking about this when I was driving home from work. This kind of brings it up, but do we chase comfort or do we chase contentment? I'm not chasing comfort anymore. I'm wanting to be content. Am I content that I missed a month and a half on the podcast. No, I'm not. I'm kind of disappointed in myself. I failed. But I knew that I could not effectively show up the way that I need to show up on the podcast for those of you who listen on a regular basis. But I need to be content that, right now, everything in my family and all of these challenges that I'm presented with, they may not be okay. But I need to be okay. I need to be content that it's not okay. I'm not trying to find all of the solutions in my life to where I'm comfortable. The solution is in content. Because contentness says I can improve and I know what will make it worse, but I can be right here and present to allow what is presented to me to be a path forward. So that was allowing that. Wow, that was a lot for a convicting spirit. But just know that there is immense power in your words, and the best thing that we can provide to others is encouragement. So, who is the enemy? This is number 6. Who is the enemy? The enemy is not the person who hurt you. If you think it's the person who hurt you, well, why did they hurt you? Did somebody else in their past traumas, did they get hurt by them? And if they got hurt by them, did that person get hurt by somebody else? You see, it's a constant revolving door of hurt. We talk about this as in generations. My mom and I were having the conversation about generations of our harmonious families. And then there's generations of chaotic, hurt families. Now, what this entails at its depth is that there is an underlying enemy. The enemy is always there, and he's attacking people individually. Therefore, the enemy is not the ex. The enemy is not the sibling. The enemy is not the family member. The parent is where I was going. But the enemy was who hurt them, right? Who hurt them was the underlying spirit of Satan. Sin, pride, resentment, hatefulness. These things are the enemy. And Satan is using the spirit of those things to hurt you and hurt others. Maybe it's that gap in your heart, in your mind, in your soul that you just have never felt connected. You have never felt like you meant something. And that hole in that void is trying to be filled with drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, that you're filling these voids in your life to mitigate having to deal with it. And it's a natural reaction. But what you're doing, let's say that, you're not being fulfilled sexually with your wife or your significant other, so you turn to pornography to fulfill that sexual desire. What are you doing at that moment? And how would your partner feel about it? Even if they aren't providing it, maybe there's some responsibility, whatever. That's all different than what I'm talking about right now. But how would they feel? Would they be hurt by it? Okay, so then are you sinning against them? And then how would she or he walk away from the relationship if if the opposite person in the relationship was watching pornography? How would they walk away from that relationship, and how would they feel? They would feel ill-equipped. They would feel inadequate. They would feel unloved. They would feel uncared for. All of these things. Who was the enemy in all of that? It wasn't that she wasn't giving him sex. It was that he chose to step away from his girlfriend or his wife and say, well, I'll just fulfill myself over here because you're not fulfilling me over here. Where is the contentness that, yeah, she's not giving it to me right now? Gosh, it's so hard because then there's like self-control. There's all these other complexities to that conversation. But the point is that there is a void being filled. And that void that is not being filled, you're filling it with something. So are you going to fill it with what is good, or are you going to fill it with something that's going to hurt others? Therefore, the enemy is always right there. Satan is coming at you in different contexts. He's coming at you from different angles of life. You never know exactly what is going to be next. Mom and I were talking about this because we look at our family picture, and it was funny because she said it, and I'm like, I've been thinking that as well, because I have the family picture laying next to my bed, and it's been there for the last 6 months, and I just think about it like we had conflict with this sibling, we had conflict with this sibling, we had conflict with this sibling, and not all of them at once. It's been one at a time, and whose turn is next for that conflict? Well, right now, it's me in the middle of that conflict. What's my responsibility? My responsibility is to effectively handle the conflict in a way that's going to be long-term beneficial so that one of my other siblings don't have to be the center of the conflict in the future. That's my responsibility. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've been absent from my family in some regards, but also absent here, is I don't know the exact direction of that. And I think that this is where empathy, compassion, grace, mercy comes in, is because I don't know what steps to take. I'm present right now, and I'm following my convictions, but I'm not convicted to act right now. I'm present right here, and I'm looking for that avenue that opens up the door that allows for the solution to occur. And I'm just being patient right here, right now. And for some people, that may be hard to understand. For the other people on the other end of that, that may be hard for them to understand. But the last thing I want to do in the midst of chaos is feed more chaos. I want to be stoic, and I want to make the right and proper decisions that don't lead to more bitterness, hurt, and resentment. I want to inspire love and bring out the best in us rather than what can often be seen as the worst. And maybe in that is the turtle head that's been tucked into the shell, and it's rearing its ugly head out and ready and vulnerable. And this is what I've seen, is that as time has gone on, I've seen more gossip, I've seen more slander. And although that becomes more hurtful, it's also something to later on expose and talk about, to find how we prevent that head coming out and rearing itself to us and manifesting itself. How do we prevent that in a healthy manner? So that is the enemy. It is not them. It is Satan. Plain and clear. Evolving understanding. Number 7. I think that's number 7. Yeah, number 7. An evolving understanding. There are things that are constantly changing throughout time. And often we think of these things as absolutes. I'm a very black and white person. I fall victim to this all the time. I want to think that this is what was and will always be. And that's not always the case. We change over time. We evolve. and this goes in, and I'm going to cover 2 here because I'm actually going on past the amount of time that I initially anticipated. But another thing was the pursuit of truth. So evolving understanding is that I'm pursuing truth with the podcast. I am not telling all the truth. I am not the truth. I do not come here as God. I do not come here as some egotistical, narcissistic man. I am unknowing. I am ill-equipped in many areas of my life. I am a failure in many areas of my life. Therefore, what I'm doing is pursuing the best understanding that I can possibly comprehend myself and effectively communicate behind this Shure SM7B microphone. That is all that I am, and all that I am trying to do is trying to pursue truth, the underlying meanings, and it's a constant dance of what I knew yesterday and what I know today and maybe what I'll know tomorrow. It's a timeless, evolving wisdom that comes is that I do not know it all today. I may not know it all tomorrow. And I definitely didn't know it all yesterday. Otherwise, I wouldn't be continuing to seek what I do not know today. It's constant. And so pursuing truth and the evolving understanding is that it is constantly presenting itself in a new light so that I understand different angles on how to approach things. This one's a good one. Who do you share good news with? It's hard to determine who to share good news with, but maybe in some context, it's what I had already talked about, is who is encouraging you, who wants what's best for you. That's who to share good news with. I don't believe that these 2 things can be outside of alignment. Knowing who to share good news with is who encourages and wants what's best for you. And if they want what's best for you, they also encourage you. All of these things are in alignment. So when I share good news, I do not share good news with somebody who thinks the worst in me. Right? I have people within my circle who believe that this is egocentric and this is all about narcissism and this is all about Levi this. What they miss in the good news are the people who are moved by the conversations. Who gives them who this conversation right now gives them some direction and some meaning, some purpose, something new, some new perspective on how to perceive things. What those people who think poorly of me think about this is that it's about me. And what I know inside of me is that I show up because I believe that I can add some value into the world so that other people can find some purpose and some meaning in their life by providing new perspectives. Maybe the conversations that Ryan and I have had, that Brody, Evan, Kip, Brock, you name it, and all of these conversations, maybe in those conversations, maybe they inspired and provoked a decision for the next day or the way that you perceived a particular conversation. And in that is the good news. That is the messages that I receive from people that gives me the true joy that I truly seek from this. I want to know how it impacted you. I don't want you to be like, Levi, you're so great, you're so perfect, you're so this, you're so that. The last thing I need is somebody to boost the ego. I just want to know, how did it impact you? That makes me so joyful. That makes me so happy. There's times when I go through the messages, I go through the voicemails that I receive and the emails, and I just sit there and I sob like a baby because I know what I had to go through to effectively communicate that. And I know how God has been at work in my life to give me the courage today to show up. And how I showed up, it directly affected somebody else. And then there's a treasure trove of other people who are affected by that. The people who don't even know that that's why they reacted the way that they reacted. And maybe it's a wife, maybe it's a kid that is affected by that. And all of it is how God has worked in my life and has planted the seed here to show and reveal the beauty and the fruits that's in my life, to then plant a seed somewhere else so that a tree grows and bears fruit somewhere else. That is so beautiful and so joyful for me to know. And the people who think otherwise of it are not the people that I'm going to share good news with. They don't understand that joy. What they think when I say, so-and-so said this about this conversation that I had, what they think is Levi's bragging. Levi is immensely about himself. And it's all about his world and not about us. Or not about this, or not about that. And they just fail to be receptive of the good news, the things that make us joyful. And I think all of us have people in our lives who think the worst about us. And we know that if we shared the good news, that it would not be effective and it would not be positive. So we got to be able to determine who we can share good news with and who we can't share good news with. Who's going to perceive it appropriately with the intentions that we have, and the people who are going to look down upon us when we share it. Know who to share good news with. One of the books that I've talked about continually that had a huge influence on my life was Ego is the Enemy. This is number 8. Well, we'll just say 9 because I covered 2 of those at once. So number 9, ego is your enemy. When I went viral on social media, I remember a few weeks later I went to a bar and we were playing beer pong. And this guy, Jared, that lives here in town, he came up to me. He's like, dude, that's so awesome that you, it's so awesome that you went viral on TikTok and you're representing our small town, da-da-da-da. And I just looked at him and I said, you know, the best thing about it is that I can walk into this bar and be like, screw everybody. Ego, look how great I am. Look at everything that I created. Look at how great Levi is. Wow. I look back at that time, and even in that moment, I'm ashamed that that's the way that I reacted, because just 3 weeks before, I finished the book, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Your ego is your downfall. If you can't be moved by other people, their reactions, their emotions, their thoughts, their ideas, if you can't be moved by those things because you're so great yourself, you are extremely arrogant. The key to all of this is curiosity. How curious are you to know the makeup of that individual? What makes them who they are? And then it's not so much about me but it's about them. So when we recognize ego is the enemy, we must also recognize that to listen and to understand is where we gain so much more independently. Evolving purpose. So when I started podcasting, started out as the Veritas 2021 podcast, which was Truth 2021. Veritas stands for truth in the Latin language. And I started it out because I was utterly miserable. And so I needed something. I needed some reason to wake up in the morning and just kind of feel for myself, fend for myself, and something that was therapeutic. And I always had this idea in the back of my mind. I wanted to start a podcast, or I wanted to do some type of broadcasting. I remember when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a meteorologist. And so like broadcasting was always kind of in the back of my mind. And I got to this place after my breakup in April of 2021 that, gosh, I need a reason to wake up in the morning. I'm depressed. I'm miserable. And so I went out and I spent, I think at the time I put $4,000 or $5,000 into the studio and bought all this equipment and started it. And I was extremely shy, lacking confidence behind the microphone. I couldn't openly share. And there was the purpose behind it was always to inspire conversations. But at the time, my purpose was, this is therapy. And over time, as I became more content, as I became more confident, it turned into, this isn't about me. This isn't about my therapy. This is about them. And so then it turned into, now I want to tell women how they should be and how they should think if they want a man like me. And so then there were conversations that related to that at its fundamental sense. And then it turned into, and I think that this is going to be the stronghold, and I think that this is the most powerful underlying purpose behind it, is how do us men effectively lead for our families, for our children, for our wives, for our siblings? How do we become more effective men within our community so that somebody like Levi at 18 years old doesn't have to wonder what a real man is? And if I can be a positive influence to inspire other men to seek their spiritual lives with Christ, if I can be more effective in how I deal with my singleness, my loneliness, if I can deal with how I have issues in my family, if I can deal with issues with my friendships and I can communicate them more effectively, then I can be more of a positive influence for others. So the purpose is evolving. And for other people, we need to give them grace because it may be hard for them to understand how that is evolving and changing over time. Okay. I just got 4 more here. So number 10. Was it 15? I don't know. There's just a lot. There's a lot of things I can cover in different areas. Death for the offender, a love story and sacrifice. Now, this comes back to Jesus Christ and when he is on the cross. And the last thing that he says is, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And when I think of that is the underlying sense of he's dying for the man that's going to shove the spear into his ribs. And he's asking for forgiveness of them. When people betray you, when people hurt you, are you willing to sacrifice yourself? Or is your ego so important? Can you ask forgiveness for them because they don't know what they are doing while they are persecuting you? It's so powerful. Can you love them through it? Can you have mercy and grace and understanding that they don't know what they're doing? They don't know how they're affecting you. They don't know how they're hurting you. They're in their own world. They're in their own mind. They're in their own beliefs. They're in their own subjective thoughts that they don't understand. They don't understand the effectiveness of you personally. So how loving can you be than to ask that even Christ would forgive them because they do not know what they're doing? It's powerful. Set yourself aside because at its core is love. Pain is a teacher. This is number 11. Pain is a teacher. I was utterly depressed in October of 2021, so much so that I wanted to end my life. It hurt. I felt alone. I felt that I didn't have anybody. And in some sense, I didn't have anybody that understood those immediate emotions. Look, I've received some conversations about saying, Levi, you can't say that you didn't have anybody because we were always right here for you during that time. And there is some truth to that. But could you understand? Could you feel those emotions as I wanted to pick up my Glock and put a bullet into my head? Could you understand that? Probably not. Why? Because you weren't there, and there may be a lot of you who have never been there. So how could you understand it? So why would I feel that you are there? It's not that you aren't there for me. It's that you don't understand that for me. Therefore, you can't be 100% present there for me. I had to work through it alone. And it taught me the beauty of life as I walked into that hotel room. And I learned to have some gratitude that my mom never has to find me like the man that killed himself. That's dark and that's morbid. But it made me examine what it was going to take for me to find peace in the midst of my depression. And it wasn't a night and day click. I think that it was only the night and day click of, I don't want my mom to find me like that. Therefore, I need to make a change. But that change didn't happen overnight. That change went on for another year and a half. Now I don't want to kill myself, but here's why I don't want to kill myself. But this is also who I want to be, and this is who I see myself becoming in 5 years. It gave me aim. It gave me purpose. It gave me a path. And now I'm like fully entrenched on that path, and I'm going, my head's down. It's there. I'm going 100%. And I'm okay with that. Yeah, I felt that way at one time. That pain taught me to be more empathetic of those who are struggling with depression. That pain was a time to evolve into who I am today. And had it not have been for that time, I want to be who I am. And that's the beauty of it all. So, number 12, responsibility is key. So one of those things I had to learn through the pain was that where did I fail? Where did I fail, and how do I become content with taking responsibility where I failed? It's a hard thing to look at because I knew there were areas that I failed, but one of the areas that I failed was being effective in communicating. Look, I'm not going to be able to move to California. Here's why I'm not going to be able to move to California. Instead of communicating that, I hid it, I buried it, and what I did was I created more issues in the future because of that. And I didn't take responsibility for those actions. Therefore, I lost somebody that I loved because I said loved. I still love her. I still want what's best for her. I still love every single ex I've ever had. I still love them in the context of not romantically. I love them in the context of I'm extremely happy that two of my first girlfriends outside of high school, both of them are married now. And I hope and I pray that they are happily married. I don't know. I don't talk to them. But I am so happy for them that they found somebody that could be the man that I couldn't be at the time. I'm so happy for both of them. But I take responsibility where I failed in each one of those relationships so that I can be effective in the future and I can provide my future wife the man that she needs. But it starts with taking responsibility of my past failures to know how to prevent failing in the same context in the future. So responsibility is key. Number 13, difficulties of living a purposeful life is all of this. You guys have seen me cry. You guys have seen me laugh hysterically. You've seen me make derogatory jokes. You've seen me drink a beer. You've probably seen me sing. You've seen all these different contexts of my life. All of my failures and all of my strengths. All of my weaknesses. And you've seen my potential. Some of you remind me of each one of those. What is the weakness? What is the strength? What is the direction? Some of you remind me of those things. And in each one of those things, the difficulty is being present with what's being said. Levi, should you be getting drunk on live? Well, I got to accept the reality. No, I shouldn't be getting drunk on the live. Levi, do you think that you should say that about women? I didn't want to admit it at the time, but no, you're right. You're right. I shouldn't have said those things about women. I should have articulated that better because I could be better. I've had people reach out to me and share with me what they see in me, what they think that I can become. And although that's encouraging, I appreciate it because it's that somebody else maybe sees something in me that I don't see in myself. And over time, that manifests itself and shows itself to me. And I can be happy and I can be content that it's changing, it's evolving, and that all of this is purposeful. All of the challenges, all of the happiness, all of the failures, all of it is for a purpose. And that's beautiful. So those are I may have lost my way, but 14 or 15 things I've learned in 29 years of my life. They weren't easy things to learn. They've been challenging things to learn. They're things that I'm still learning and things that I'm still articulating. There's still so much that I don't know and still so much that I want to understand. I think if I could close this episode, I would say, be curious. Always seek understanding before seeking your ability to communicate your understanding. Seek the understanding. Don't lean on your own. Be humble and be confident that you do not know it all. And that confidence is developed over time in a series of proven actions that allows you to see things for what they really are, so that you can be present in the moment, so that you can be confident, so that you know where you can grow. There's beauty in all of this. So at minimum, that's 14 or 15 things that you maybe can pull away from. My goal is to be a living example of Jesus Christ. And I fail in so many areas. And I'm strong, and I'm successful in many other areas. And in all of it is just a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for the opportunities that I have been presented and the gifts that God has blessed me with. You have gifts as well. You have a meaning and you have a purpose just as much as I do. None of us are any better than the other, and all of us are just as in need of a Savior as each other. Therefore, guys, if you would, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast. Leave a rating on Spotify. Please reach out to me on email. All of the links will be in the bottom of the description. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a family friend, a friend, somebody within your circle who you think will pull something important from a podcast such as this. All I ask is that you as a listener, is that you come alongside me on this journey and that you give me grace and mercy and you reach out to me when you don't agree, and that we have the ability to have the conversation without taking things personal. And I have that expectation of myself, but I also have that expectation as we pursue truth, it will provoke conflict, and that when we experience conflict, that we do not internalize it and take it personally, but that we seek to understand more. And I leave you guys on that this week, is just immense gratitude and to be more aware of how we can grow and how we can evolve as individuals so that we can be more effective for our families and our communities. You guys have a great rest of your week, and God bless.